All right, we're back and we're going to talk about episodic versus chronic stress. So, episodic stress would be the result of an acute situation. So, it's something that is happening that's sort of encapsulated. Examples of that would be things like something that's going on in the family, like maybe a divorce, or maybe somebody in the family lost their job, or there is a changing economic condition in the society, right? So there's a recession going on or something like that. It could be some kind of trauma that I've given this picture of a firefighter who's, he's probably experiencing some stress, or at least he's got smoke in his eyes. I'm not sure what's going on. But the idea with episodic stress is that it is really an episode, right? Some kind of acute situation, and it's going to pass more than likely. Chronic stress is ongoing stress. And a lot of times we look to things like poverty. Living in poverty is stressful. Living in a dysfunctional family where there's a lot of arguing or fighting or drug use or something like that. Being in chronic pain is stressful. If you've ever known somebody who has, back pain or something like that, a lot of times they're irritable because it's just never ending. They always have this pain. So we've got that episodic stress, we've got that chronic stress. And, either type is not ideal. Like, you don't really want to experience stress. But on average, the episodic stress is less physically harmful over the long term than chronic stress is. A lot of times chronic stress looks less stressful, right? Because it's just sort of, this is how you live. It looks from the outside less stressful than, let's say, having to fight a fire in a high-rise building would look, something like that. But it turns out that the chronic stress is actually the one that is the much more likely to lead to the physical problems of like cardiovascular disease, digestive problems, diabetes, things like that are more likely to occur as a result of chronic stress. So, and I have some really acute things that can happen from chronic stress, much more likely than episodic stress to result in suicide, to result in lashing out and violence, and then a lot of different medical disorders like the ones I was listing. So as counterintuitive as it might seem, chronic stress is the long-term, more harmful type. Now, there are three types of strain. There's job-related strain, and I've already mentioned that it can contribute to low job satisfaction. It can really reduce motivation and interfere with performance and can increase absence from work. Emotional strain makes us, less patient. It makes us more irritable, and it can contribute to burnout, that emotional exhaustion I was talking about before. Depersonalization, where you start to actually feel like, a cog in this machine, as opposed to, an individual. I was talking earlier about the loss of agency that oftentimes can come from being under strain. That's depersonalization, where you feel like you're not the one making your own decisions. And then reduced personal accomplishment, where the person is not achieving goals that they normally did. They're not, going above and beyond. They're not able to, write that book that they've been working on, or whatever it is. Physiological strain, life and work stress predicts the frequency of serious illness. The more stress that a person is under in life in general, like I was mentioning, poverty and things like that, or at work, the more likely they are to develop some kind of serious illness. This lady's rubbing her wrist, right? She's got carpal tunnel. Serious illnesses, like I was mentioning before, include things like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes. What are some other really good examples? I think everything I'm thinking of is related to that. Irritable bowel syndrome. These things are oftentimes tied back to chronic stress and strain. So life and work stress can contribute to those problems. So some research on managerial stress. There are different types of stressors. There are the challenge-related stressors, and there are the hindrance-related stressors. With the challenge-related stressors, we have, time pressures, high levels of responsibility, job overload that goes along with being a manager, right? A lot of times, all of those external pressures are impinging on a manager. Hindrance-related stressors come from constraints that interfere with the work that the manager is trying to do. There's red tape that's preventing them from being able to do the thing that would make their lives easier. They can't do because of the red tape, or the politics of the office where, you can't go step on someone's toes just to get this done. And so you have to find a workaround. And so these hindrances can be really stressful. I could just get this done, but I can't just get this done. There are all these constraints on me. So research has been focusing on the impact of challenge-related stressors and hindrance-related stressors on job satisfaction of managers and the likelihood of a manager searching for a new job. And what they've found is that challenge-related stressors are positively related to job satisfaction. So people who have more time pressure and high levels of responsibility and job overload tend to have higher job satisfaction, and then they tend to be less likely to search for a new job. So it looks like the challenge-related stressors are actually kind of motivating for the average manager. There's a complete opposite pattern for the hindrance-related. So a person who's experiencing stress because they just can't get it done because of the workplace politics or the red tape in the workplace, that's inversely related with job satisfaction. So the more constraints, the lower the job satisfaction, and the more likely the person is to be searching for a new job. So challenge-related seems to be okay for managers. Hindrance-related, not. And when you talk about hindrance-related issues, you're talking about a workplace that is not set up very well, right? Because if we have certain things that we want done, we would want to try and remove as many of the constraints as we can so that that job could get done. Like, that's not a very effective workplace to have constraints, interfering with the manager's ability to get the work done. All right. So how do we cope with stress? Finally, I've been alluding to this for a long time. So when we cope with stress, coping is actually the term for strategies for managing stress. So there's the problem-focused coping, where we actually try and change the situation. We try to alter the stress-inducing problem itself. So if I'm experiencing stress because of all this red tape, I might try and figure out a way to get the rules changed, right? I might try to figure out if there's a way to get around this red tape by going to the right person or getting somebody else to sign it off or something like that, right? Like, I'm going to actually approach the problem in problem-focused coping. With emotion-focused coping, I might realize there's nothing I can do. This red tape is what it is. There's no way around it. Nobody's willing to sign off on it. So now I have to focus on minimizing the emotional effects of the stress-inducing event. So maybe I have to say, okay, I have to look for the silver lining in this. Well, since there's all this red tape and things like that, I guess this is going to cause me to figure out some system within the company that I wouldn't otherwise have had to figure out, because it would have been, easy just to achieve my goal. So at least I'm finding out this new system. Okay, so that makes me feel less bad about the fact that I'm being thwarted in my achievement of my goal. Let me give you another work-related example that is really common for employees. Let's say that you have a difficult commute getting to work. You don't live that far. This was my life living back on the west side of the state. My commute was only 16 miles, but it was some mornings taking me as much as an hour and a half to get to work. And so that's really frustrating. That means there was a lot of time sitting still. Now, I'll confess, those were times when there was like an accident or something, but an average commute was taking me 16 miles was taking me 45 minutes on an average commute. So what can I do about that? Well, so if I want to take a problem-focused approach, I might say, well, I need to move closer to work, or I need to get a different job that doesn't involve this commute, or maybe I could change my hours so that I could commute on off hour times so I can avoid all the other traffic. Those are all problem-focused approaches. Maybe I could say, let's see if I could take the bus. And so then that way, at least I can read or something instead of being, sitting here and being responsible sitting in traffic. Maybe that would be an improvement. So things that would allow me to actually change the circumstances so that the commute itself is better would be under the header of problem-focused. None of those were possible given my circumstances, so I had to adopt emotion-focused strategies. So I tried to minimize the emotional effects by doing things like listening to a book on tape. There were times, in fact, when I was listening to like a mystery as a book on tape, and I would finally get to work, and I didn't want to get out of the car because we were like right at the critical moment, because I was really enjoying my commute because I got to listen to my book on tape. So emotion-focused coping would be focused on making the situation more tolerable for the individual who has to deal with that situation. Like, you can't change the situation, you have to change your reaction to it. So now I actually like my commute. I get to listen to my book on tape. Or I'm trying to think of another emotion. Maybe I'm going to meditate with my eyes open, just FYI. But maybe I'm going to sit there and think calm thoughts because I'm getting ready to go to work anyway. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to sort of get myself in the correct mindset. Or maybe I could rehearse my lectures while I'm driving so that I can, be fluent while I'm delivering my lecture. You could use your commute in ways that takes your mind off of it or makes it productive, and then that makes it feel a little less stressful. It still is what it is, but at least you're not reacting to it as a stressful thing anymore. So that's the idea with these different approaches to coping with stress. And I like to throw this in I don't think this is technically in our textbook, but I wanted to throw it in because it's really good for all of us to know sort of how we can try to make ourselves feel a little bit better given the circumstances that we're in. It turns out that in individualistic societies, most people try the problem-focused strategies first. They try and actually change the problem. In collectivistic societies, they tend to go with the emotion focus first. They just assume that the situation can't be changed, and the only thing that can be changed is their reaction to it. So you see a lot more emotion focused coping among people from collectivistic societies. Within a society like the US with mostly an individualistic approach, males tend to be more individualistic than females. So you're going to see males being much more likely to try the problem focused approach and try and actually change the situation. And females to be more likely to try emotion focused. On average, I don't know what any individual who's listening to me right now would do, but on average, males tend to go with a problem focused approach where they try to figure out, okay, what could I do to make this easier? Or, what could I do to actually change the situation? Can we change a law? Or can I, get a dolly so that I don't have to carry these heavy loads? Or they think of like solutions to the problem, whereas women on average are more likely to say, okay, well, this is the situation, so what can I do so it's not bothering me as much? All right. Now, emotional competence training is one way to help a person learn how to, sort of control their own reactions to stressors. So, emotional competence refers to our ability to understand, express, and manage our feelings. This is a subset of emotional intelligence. So emotional competence, our ability to understand, express, and manage our feelings. So in general, emotional competence is linked to general well-being. It's linked to work performance, better work performance, and it's linked to better academic performance. There are trainings that people can take to improve their subjective well-being as an employee, their physical well-being. So it actually seems to help people to sort of avoid the negative effects that can come from stressors and being under strain. In one study, they found decreases in perceived and objective stress. So perceived stress is the person reporting, I feel like I'm under stress. Objective stress is measurements of their heart rate or their blood pressure and other physical signs that they're expressing, cortisone levels, things that would are part of our physiology that illustrate that we're experiencing stress. So we have decreases in both the perceived and the objective stress. And then we have decreases in physical complaints about, soreness or other kinds of stomach aches, headaches, things like that. And then also improved social relationships. So that's pretty strong support for the emotional competence training. It turns out that even without emotional competence training, having social support can help with a lot of the things that were improved in that study. So if an organization doesn't have, the resources to put their employees through emotional competence training, providing social support can really have a big effect too. Well, I'm going to stop talking here and let you, in the playlist, watch this guy who looks a little concerned, doesn't he? But he's going to talk about emotional competence training and how it can be implemented in the workplace. So I will see you back in my next lecture.